Brown says, get that India. Big boy.
Call an ambulance! Maybe call a police! Oh, what a shot! What a shot! Campbell Killer!
Hello and welcome back to another edition of the Tip Sheet Podcast. As always, I'm your host, John, also known as 4020. Joining me to preview all four games from the upcoming weekend for the Parramatta Eels, my good mate, Sixties. We've been very critical of the Eels in the last few podcasts, Sixties, but we are excited for the weekend, believe it or not. A couple of teams playing for their finals lives in the Jersey Flegg and the NRL. We've got a team looking to kickstart its season in the NRLW. And look, the New South Wales Cup, they're not going to make the finals, but we've got some young kids we're excited to see.
We've got a full weekend ahead of us, mate. We've got the BGA player reunion in Jack's Bar and Grill in Parramatta Leagues Club on Saturday. And, of course, people are able to pay homage to the pioneers in blue and gold jerseys, whether they be from a long time ago or maybe in the recent past. But those who've worn the Parramatta jersey with pride will be there on Sunday. It's an extended weekend reunion for the Blue and Gold Alliance. They'll be doing that walk of honour to around CommBank Stadium on Sunday before the big game. So make sure you're there. Give them a round of applause as they walk around, because you know that it's very important that these blokes get recognised for the years that they put in, or even the short time that they wore in the blue and gold jersey. And it's always great for them to get together and enjoy spending a bit of time together every so often.
Yes, indeed. Really looking forward to that. It's a fantastic group of former players and club members, so really keen to see them celebrated on Saturday and then be celebrated on Sunday.
Yeah, we'll be looking to grab a few chats with different players on when we're there on Saturday with them in their luncheon. I'm really looking forward to that, mate. I mean, it makes it for a very, very busy weekend. I'm not sure that we can juggle doing both New South Wales Cup and NRLW followed by the NRL game. But what we can guarantee is that we will definitely be there for the NRL match, and we are there ourselves in Jack's Bar and Grill after the match on Sunday. Now, remember, it's a 2:00 kickoff for the match, so we're there post-game. So probably about half an hour after the first grade game wraps up, you can come up to Jack's Bar and Grill, grab a drink, have a feed, listen to plenty of footy talk. Not sure who we've got there as our guest of honour this week, but geez, I'm guessing that with the blue and gold reunion there, we've got to be able to pick up someone, mate.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll be able to finagle.
Maybe we'll have a rotation of guests there for people to have a listen to.
Yeah, we'll be able to finagle something, some way, somehow there. All right, before we jump into our quartet of preview 60s, a quick shout out to the sponsors of the show, Big Swing Golf North Mead and Star Partners Real Estate, Auburn, Newcastle and Parramatta, helping us get these episodes out for you guys to listen to and digest. Thank you massively to both our sponsors there. Let's get into it, big fella. Let's start with we'll go chronologically in terms of age order here or seniority. We'll start with the Jersey Flegg at the lowest peg of the development or senior football process.
The young ones. The
young'uns, yes. A group of young boys that we're very keen to see develop now. They're playing on Saturday, the 5th of August, 3:30 p.m. out at Parramatta New Era Stadium. They're taking on the St. George Illawarra Dragons. This is a pivotal clash. Always do that. Pivotal clash for them as they take on the team that's placed just above them on the ladder and part of a three-way shootout for the final spot in the top 5 alongside the Melbourne Storm. They're looking pretty good for this one, 60s. Not quite full strength, given there's some guys either injured or promoted to New South Wales Cup, but it is a strong team nonetheless. We start at fullback with Arpa Tweedle. On the wings, you've got Matthew Komalafi and Ethan Martin. Richard Penasini and Samuel Luizu are in the centres. Joshua Lynn has come back from New South Wales Cup. He had a couple of games up there, hopefully better for the run. He'll partner Ethan Sanders in the halves. Brock Parker and Tony Mattelli are the bookends. Matty Arthur at dummy half. Jock Brazel is back from a one-game suspension. Big in for the team there. He starts on what I will assume will be the left edge, given what we've seen this year. Max Tupou on the right. Nicholas Lenars is the lock forward. On the interchange, Jacob Davis, he's the backup dummy half. Saxon Pryke, Sam Tuovaiti, and Lance Lima. Some big units there in the middle. Araz Namva is the 18th man / concussion replacement. And yeah, they're taking on the St. George Illawarra Dragons. Just trying to think if these two teams would have met earlier in the season. If I'm just going to sec to pull up their results here. The Eels played them way back in round 5. Accounted for them 32-16 out at Ziems Park. So that's with a Z there. And I don't think they've met since. No, this will be their second meeting this season. And yeah, this is one they've got to have, big fella.
Yeah. Look, the team has been in quite good form the last few weeks. Now, they lost that game to the Roosters 2 weeks back, but that was a cracking game of rugby league. The Roosters they're top of the table for a reason. And the Eels took it to them very early on, built up a 10-0 lead. The Roosters pegged it back, and they were really going toe-to-toe with a side. Like that Roosters side, so big. Like they're just monsters out there. And I thought the Eels really matched them for much of the game. It was really a couple of unfortunate errors in yardage that were made by the Eels that gave possession at key times to the Roosters, and they made the Eels pay. So it was, and that basically accounted for the 2-try difference in the end. Was those 2 errors? I think there was one where the ball was picked up after it was dropped, and the Roosters scored straight away. The other one, I think they scored about 3 or 4 tackles later. Mm-hmm. So without turning over the ball in those circumstances, it would have been a very, very tight contest. So then the Eels went down to Melbourne last week. You'd have to say they were convincing winners. It was only that the Storm scored 2 very late tries. I'm talking about 2 tries in the last 4 or 5 minutes that narrowed the margin to 8. Prior to that, the Eels were winning by 20. They did miss an opportunity to completely eliminate the differential difference between themselves and the Storm. The Storm sit above them still by 2 points, I think, mate.
I think they're one win queen of the Parramatta Eels. So this is an important game.
So they're relying on the Storm having a loss in this run home, because without that loss, like if the Storm keep winning, well, there's nothing that the Eels can do. But if both teams, if the Eels get 1 win more than the Storm, they're relying on being able to improve their own differential and hope that the Storm don't do too much improving on theirs. I think there's something like about 20 points difference, just over 20 points.
Yep, just
something like that. So, I mean, that's achievable, but geez, you would have loved to have gone in where they had essentially the same differential with these rounds to go. Mm-hmm. So, mate, I'm going to tip a win there, because we're looking at a spine which is the SG Ball spine. So you've got Tweedle, you've got Lynn, you've got Sanders, you've got Arthur. Now that was a successful combination, and at the SG Ball level, they've come up to Flegg, and they basically hit the ground running as well there. You've got interesting inclusions that have happened over the last few weeks. We've spoken about Ethan Martin before. Mm-hmm. He's been there for, I guess it's starting to get close to 2 months, maybe something like that. 6 weeks to 2 months that he's been in the team. He's got a point of difference, hasn't he? As a winger, he's got interesting footwork, carries the ball powerfully, very elusive winger. Brock Parker, he had his stint up in New South Wales Cup last week. He's probably the most consistent forward that Coach Craig Brennan has at his disposal. Maybe Nick Lenaz would have reason to argue that. So, but they're both very, very consistent performers. So, and then you start to look at Tony Mattaelli. I mentioned the other day, I prefer him in the middle than I do on the edge. And he's playing in the middle for the Jersey Flegg. He had a whale of a game last week against the Storm. So we'd like him to continue that. Max Tupou had a really good game too against the Roosters a couple of weeks back. So interesting to see how he goes. Jock Brazel, we know what Jock produces. So Look, I'm really keen on their chances, mate. What about you?
Yeah, I'm feeling pretty positive. 60s. They've gotten themselves into a nice groove, into a nice rhythm. It sucks to see someone like Blaze drop out of a team just when he's gotten back with that injury, but I do think that they've gotten a pretty handy replacement in Joshua Lynn, a guy who spent a few games up in New South Wales Cup as a young kid, so he should be better for that run. And yeah, they've got a really dynamic backline now. I love Richard Penasini. Ethan Martin has been electric in the time he's been at the club. Samuel Louise, who's no, stranger to high levels of football, so he should bring some experience there. So they've got the weapons in the back line. They've got a pretty industrious forward pack now of Tony Mattelli joining that front row rotation. You mentioned the consistency of Brock Parker. They've got some great strike on the bench between Pryke, Tuavaiti and Fualima. And getting someone like Jock Brazel back gives them a real hard edge in this team. So I'm very optimistic of this one. I think they're going to give it a good shake. They've got some tough games upcoming too. I think they're going to play the Roosters again. Penrith, I think, is in the mix as well. So they've got some really big, not just in terms of like finishing the season, but just in terms of a neutral contest, big contest coming up. But I think they start this week with a good win against St. George.
It's interesting just looking at the team now. It's a real mix of the players that were in Flegg before and the SG Ball. I think the split's about 8 SG Ball players, 9 that were in the Flegg prior to the SG Ball season concluding. So I think he's got a good mix there this week, John. Look, they got the win the last time. Let's back them to do a double against the Dragons by taking this one out.
Agreed.
And I guess this now takes us to the New South Wales Cup.
Yep.
Yes, so I'll get you to run through the team list, and then we'll do our best to find a way that the Eels can maybe get home in that one.
Yeah, obviously bleak finals prospects non-existent at this point, so it's all about player development, and there are some players to watch out for in this grade. This one kicks off at 11 o'clock a.m. out at Kellyville Park, so you can make it from reserve grade to NRL if you want to race and think you can get the parking. But yeah, taking on the St. George Illawarra Dragons. These two teams met way back, where is it here? Round 5 again, so same as the Flegg, but they had a 26-all draw. One of those costly early results we're talking about, 60s. It was a comeback, I think, in this one, though, wasn't it? Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
Zach Sini and Hayes Dunster scoring in the last 11 minutes to help the Eels get to the draw. I think, by memory, Rankin had the 2 shots out wide and missed both of them.
Yes, that's correct.
To take the game. So looking at the lineup here, named at fullback Arthur Miller-Stephen, you got Chris Tupou and Wanga Blake on the wings, Jeremiah Masia and Lachlan Blackburn in the centres. Lockie Blackburn making his cup debut for the Parramatta Eels. Good to see. He's been a player that's been a bit checked by injury this year, but has got some genuine versatility between the back row and centres. An interesting asset to see how he develops. Not a huge fan of the rest of the back line outside of Artie there, 60s. Tupou, Momasia and Blake. Well, Wanga is an out-and-out back, and I don't have issues with him dropping back to reserve grade, obviously, but again, coming back to the use of players in other positions, not necessarily helping that development pipeline kick into overdrive, but in the halves, you've got Dejan Arce and Jordan Rankin. Dejan obviously dropping back to the cup after Dylan Brown returns to the NRL. In the front row, Kai Rodwell and Offa Hickey Ogden are the props. Brendan Hands, the surprise inclusion in the New South Wales Cup this week. We'll talk about that shortly. Jack Murchie, Charlie Geimer, another young gun to watch, and Dan Keir round out the back row. On the interchange, it's Jaden Yates, Jonte Jr., Bethan Meza, Nico Apelu, and Noah Reid, another Flegg talent getting his taste of New South Wales Cup, and hopefully he can hold his own up there, the big fella.
Yeah, so this is a mixed bag for me because unfortunately the Eels' form in New South Wales Cup has not been something that you'd want to be spending too much time talking about because they've had some heavy defeats. They're sitting with the worst differential of any team in the New South Wales Cup, running third last. And when you look at having to play players out of position, having to bring in players from Ron Massey Cup football, I'm not knocking players that are playing Ron Massey Cup in any way, but we're talking about the grade that is the immediate feeder to NRL. And that's how depleted our backline stocks are, to have a back rower playing at centre, and a winger that's been called up from Ron Massey Cup. And look, I'm very happy to see players elevated from Jersey Flegg. It gives them that experience playing open age football. And that is basically what's happened for a couple of the boys here. Arthur Miller-Stephen was an elevation from earlier this season. He started the year in Jersey Flegg. You've got Lachlan Blackburn, again, Jersey Flegg elevation there. We've got Charlie Geimer, who was playing SG ball this year. So he's gone from SG ball to Jersey Flegg. Now it's the New South Wales Cup. And of course, Noah Reid, who's the latest to get a taste of open age football in this. I think Noah was originally from Newcastle and joined the Eels this year. And he's a big unit. I think he's played Australian schoolboys at a fairly young age. And he had some really good early season form. He was one that I was keeping an eye on there because I think he's got that capacity for his game as a middle forward to really come along in leaps and bounds. If he could get a pre-season somewhere along the line, I think he's got a lot of potential, that bloke. So, yeah, as I said, it's a mixed bag because I don't have a lot of confidence in them being able to get a win. But I really would like to see the young blokes perform well in New South Wales Cup level. And because we're talking about some players there who could very well be playing New South Wales Cup next year, like to be the players that make up, a regular team appearance, a part of a regular team appearance in New South Wales Cup. So, fingers crossed, mate. I think for us, it's probably a bit too challenging to get to Kellyville and then out to CommBank Stadium. And we do have our next match that we'll preview is the curtain raiser, is it not, for the NRL? We've got the NRLW kicking off.
So that's the other alternative plan of attendance, isn't it? If you want to have the big double header out at CommBank, make sure you're right. I'm sorry, I just had to do a double take. They've got the kickoff time listed as 12:03 p.m. I've never seen something like that. I don't know if that's a clerical error on NRL.com or they actually intend to kick off 3 minutes past midday. But this one is the NRLW clash between the two grand finalists last year, the reigning champions Newcastle Knights coming to CommBank Stadium to take on the Parramatta Eels. Eels sit in 10th, the Knights in 5th right now. Let's go through this team. I don't believe there are any changes from what was the modified team list ahead of that game against the Dragons 60s. But
no, you're right. Yep.
They are named in their proper sequential numbers now because it's not a pre-kickoff reshuffle. So Abby Church is at fullback, Zawi Faye and you got Monique Donovan on the wings, Mahalia Murphy and Cassie Toi Hiku are in the centres. Pahuka Berryman Duff works alongside the rookie Rosemary Beckett, who has her second game in the NRLW. Hopefully she can have another good one. In the front row, Talisha O'Neill and Ruby Jean Kennard-Ellis. Ruben Cherrington is the dummy half. Amelia Murphy and Chantel Stowers are on the edges. Kennedy Cherrington captains the team from lock forward. On the interchange bench, the reserve dummy half, Capri Payakau, Nakia Davis-Welsh, Shannon Muru and Madeline Jones extend the roster. Tyler Amiatu, Kyra Simon, Kimberly Hunt, Kelsey Clark, and Elsie Albert. Albert was billed on Team List Tuesday as an outside chance of playing this week as she battles to recover from a calf injury. But given what we know about calf injuries in Rugby League 60s, you got to think that it's fairly wildly optimistic that she would be included in the last second here.
Yeah, and this is unfortunate because we already know that Rachel Pearson's not there. Have they got an actual date for her return as yet, mate?
On the broadcast last week, they said that the club was looking at round 4 for both Albert and Pearson. So that was a tentative round 4 by the sounds of it. So realistically, we could be halfway through the competition without getting a halfback back. But
yeah,
you sort of do what you can.
Look, I can find positives in every single player that's listed in that team. What seems to be happening that we've seen the last few weeks is that late in the halves, or certainly in the second half, they just have moments where the game gets away from them defensively. What they absolutely must do, the Eels NRLW team, is to have greater line speed in defence. And I think we've seen that, and you wrote about it in your Gin and Logic, mate, that having a passive defensive line is the surefire way to getting run over.
Yeah, definitely.
And unfortunately, that's basically what's ended up happening. Is it reaches that stage where if you're not going up to meet the attack, if you're constantly backpedaling, which is what happens, eventually you just can't backpedal anymore. The team's coming through. Tackles are missed. It's just, yeah. And so they've allowed the opposition to get on the front foot at key moments in the games. And look, in that first week against the Tigers, Parramatta held the lead for a significant part of that game, and even into the second half, and were scrambling. But you could see that the floodgates were going to open, and you suspected that when they opened, they were going to open big time, and that's pretty much what happened. And again, they looked like they were going to match it with the Dragons, and they should have had some confidence after beating the Dragons in the trial. But the kicking game of McGregor.
Yeah.
McGregor. That kicking game of McGregor was a real point of difference for the Dragons. Those pinpoint kicks into the corner were just absolutely cruelled the Eels' chances. And again, it ended up a comfortable win for the opposition. This week, well, all players basically have to be able to produce their best football. It's as simple as that. You're talking about them taking on the team that's the defending premiers. And, when they've got someone like Tamika Upton, who's just one of the elite players in the NRL, lined up against them, then of course you got the Southwell sisters as well. Mate, it's a big ask. Have you got anything you'd want to add to that? Because I want to tip an Eels win. So maybe I'm gonna hold back a tip this week. I don't know. I'm uncomfortable about tipping against them, but it's tough.
It is very tough, 60s, and realistically, they have to have this win because of the bizarre NRLW scheduling. Even though they've got 2 more home games listed for the rest of the remaining 6 rounds, their home games in Cogra and Canberra. They're going to get no advantage playing these home games. So they've got no more CommBank Stadium games after this weekend, and it's all on the road. So they're going to do it tough, and it is very hard to tip them because the big thing that would have been what I would have said the equalising factor this week would have been the revenge factor, because this was a team that knocked them over in the grand final, the team that broke their hearts. But from that team that lost in the grand final, you've got Abby Church, Zawi, Cassie was part of the team, but I don't think she was playing. You've got Kendi Charrington, Ruby Jean Kennard Ellis. Is that it? I think that might be it. So,
the ones that took the field, yeah. Ruben,
yeah,
was part of the
Ruben,
squad.
sorry, Ruben, yeah, like Cassie was also part of the squad there. So, you've got a part of a team that's going to be fired up for this one, but I think there's a lot of dissociation from that grand final loss for the rest of them because they weren't Eels. So I don't know if they're going to have enough motivation here to get the upset, but they do need to find a way to get this win. And honestly, on a technical level, there's things they can do, obviously, but I think this is just all about firing up, just getting real angry, going out there for energy and hurting them, like making them drop the ball, making them get out of their rhythm. And, technically you want to be as efficient as possible, but just, show some, not like passion for the jersey, because I know these girls are incredibly passionate about NRLW, but for themselves, just get some aggression, all that pent-up frustration from the first couple of games, unleash it this week.
Okay, so a question I'd have for you, for a game like this, and we are, and I mean we've both got a high opinion of Rose Beckett and what the future has in store for her. But given that you've got such a key out in Rachel Pearson, would you simplify their game plan, or would you be encouraging them to use the ball? I mean, so, the way that I look at it I almost have a sense that there's nothing to lose for them because it is a shortened season. So they, do they just go? Is the instruction go out there and enjoy yourself?
I think you might be spot on.
Yeah. Because the alternative is with simplifying it and just giving simple KPIs for each player to work on out there. I don't know if there's a signal with that you're recognising that there are limitations to the team. Look, I'd be tempted. I mean, we are so far away from being qualified to comment on what coaches should or shouldn't do. It's not funny, but I just have that feeling that I think they need to find some fun out there in their footy. So, let them explore that. But we definitely need, in defence, to see some aggression and some line speed. So there you go. We've just given Dean Witters our game plan. We'll send him the invoice later. So we're saying let him have a bit of fun in attack, Dean. Make sure you got the line speed and a bit of aggression in defence.
Yeah.
So in other words, in defence, follow the Cherrington sisters,
exactly,
because they love mixing it.
Exactly. Okay, so that brings us to the final game on the weekend, the NRL fixture against the St. George Illawarra Dragons. 11, that hurts to say, but 11 v 16. Eels taking a tumble down the ladder based on some results, and actually got some results go their way too, so it could have been worse, sorry. But they're taking on a Dragons team that looks like this. 2:00 p.m. kickoff, CommBank Stadium, 60s. Tyrell Sloan at fullback. You got Matthew Fianai and Michaela Ravalawa, there. On the wings, Masesi Sully or Moses Sully and Zach Lomax are in the centres. Talatau Monet and Ben Hunt in the halves. Francis Molo and Blake Laurie in the starting front row. Jacob Little at dummy half. Billy Burns, Dan Russell and Jack DeBellin in the back row. But Jack DeBellin has been rubbed out for 3 or 4 weeks after failing to have his bid for a what's it called? Not grapple tackle, or the hip drop tackle at the judiciary downgraded. And I got to say that was probably pretty tough, but that's how the judiciary rolls. On the interchange, Connor Mulison, Michael Molo, Toby Couchman, and Zane Musgrove. So I'd expect probably Michael Molo, but maybe Zane Musgrove to come into that starting lock role and then to promote one of their extended players into the roster who could come from this pool. Ryan Couchman, Sione Finau, Jack Bird, Max Fianai, and Ben Murdoch-Masila. But yeah, that's how the Dragons line up this week, 60s. For the Eels, lots of changes. We spoke about it on Team List Tuesday and the news podcast, but at fullback, Quinton Gufferson, who is the captain. On the wings, Isaac Lumi and Sean Russell. Will Penasini and Bowie Simonson are in the centres. So right now, Isaac Lumi, the change in the backline over Wonga Blake. Dylan Brown and Mitchell Moses are the halves. Brown making his long return from a suspension for off-field indiscretions. In the front row, Joe Ofingahi and Junior Barlaw are the bookends, with Joey Lussick taking over as the sole dummy half this week. Brendan Hands again dropped to reserve grade. Ryan Madison moves from the interchange as a middle forward to the starting left edge to shore up that side defensively. Bryce Cartwright is on the right edge. Jermaine Hopgood locked forward. On that interchange bench, Luca Moretti, Andrew Davey, Warumu Greg making a rapid return from a Liz Frank injury. The Wolverine, like for real, incredible healing powers there. Mac Hesse Makatoa record to first grade. Extended roster, Brendan Hands. Arfamela Stephen, there's an interesting name there. Offa Hickey Ogden, Dejan Arce, and Jack Murchie. Ziggy Preslaska Adamski, Ziggy, is the main official. You've got Chris Butler in the box. And yeah, no other way to spin this 60s, but the Eels have to have this one.
Yeah, this is literally them walking on the precipice. It's like they're if they falter there, that's goodbye to the season. And they're very close to that anyway, given that they've got 2 of the remaining 4 matches are against the top 2 teams in the Panthers and the Broncos. So this is one of the matches that they might be favoured to win. But if they played similar to how they played last week against the Storm, the Dragons would get them.
Yeah.
It's a horrible thing to say, but the way that the Eels performed last week, the Tigers would beat them. Like, and that's just a blunt assessment that I don't think is unfair to say. It really was a capitulation against the Storm. Now, there's been a lot made about how the Storm performed last week, and people are, talking them up about their prospects now. I'm going to suggest, look, there was a couple of blokes that played really well for the Storm, but talk about handing the game to them on a platter.
Yeah.
The way that the Eels performed. Melbourne did not have to do anything special to win that game. Don't get carried away with the Storm's form at all. The reality was that Parramatta were very, very poor in that game, and they cannot afford to have the same attitude. And notice I'm talking about attitude in this week, because we saw, and we spoke about it in the post-match instant reaction podcast, that it seemed that the Eels went into this game with a negative mindset, literally believing that they had lost the game before they've even taken the field. You can see that in the body language, in the effort plays that were non-existent. Mm-hmm. And anyone that has the slightest passing interest in rugby league can recognise when there's effort plays that aren't there. It's just, there were tries that the Storm scored from close range that screamed out that there were blokes not doing the bare minimum, let alone putting in a little bit of extra effort. Yeah. So that's hard. It might sound harsh, as I said, but I think it's an accurate call on what we witnessed last week. Now, how much difference will Dylan Brown make? Obviously, it will be, if he's playing as he can, it will make a significant difference. And again, I'm going to come back to headspace. It's going to have a lot to do with Dylan's headspace this week.
Yep.
Will he be able to block out the noise that will be around his return? And we know that that's coming. Whether it's coming from supporters, probably both his own supporters and the opposition. It's going to come from the media. It's going to come probably from the opposition players, might be saying something to him out there, for all you know.
Yep.
And there's been a lot of talk about he's got to repay his teammates, and that's been said publicly by Brad Arthur, that he's got a job to do in repaying his teammates. All I'd suggest that he has to do is to play as Dylan Brown does. Just try to, block it all out and get on with football. So he will make a significant difference. Where we have to be hopeful that he makes the greatest difference is on that left side defence, isn't it? I mean, and that, because we know that when you have the systemic failures that we had last week, that those tend to start from the inside out, don't they?
Yes.
Especially with a slide defence. So you've got the biggest change on that side. Like, people will go, Wonga Blake is the biggest change. And don't get us wrong, I think he slipped out of the systems last week. But once you've got it right with someone who's just a class defender like Dylan Brown, that can make all the difference in the world for what the players outside of him then do in their defensive movements and their defensive decisions. So yeah, he's going to make a bit of a difference. But then look, I look at the Dragons. They're a team that's got errors written all over their faces.
Yeah.
It's like if they were playing the Guess Who game, it would be a thesaurus of words that are synonyms for mistake, that they'd be wearing as their headbands, because that's pretty much them in a nutshell. Now, of course, what that means is that they're flashy. You just don't know what might end up happening.
Yep.
in a particular game. That's my fear. I have the fear of Lomax and Ravalawa.
I was about to say that right edge has got some serious strike.
Yeah. And, Lomax is just going to chance his hand. You know that. Like, people were praising him the other week for being restrained. It's not in his nature to be restrained. He's going to try those flick passes and miracle balls. And if Ravalawa's... look, he's probably been one of their most consistent players, Ravalawa. He's basically what Mike Acevo should be in terms of consistency. Like, he is a very good rugby league winger. We know that Ben Hunt's a class player. Amone, he's one of those flashy players. You're going to get something miraculous, or you're going to get something dumb. Who knows? Who knows? It'll probably be all the miraculous this week. I look at that and I think I can see advantages for the Eels in a number of places around the field, but most notably, I think we have a definite advantage in the forwards, and I think we still hold an advantage in the backs, but probably St. George might have some players who are capable of a little bit more of the flashy play than what we do. So, what do I want from the team this week, John? Do we want them just to go back to pretty well straight, that straightforward, hard-edged Parramatta football? I think, it sounds like a broken record when we ask for that, but it's the successful formula. Yeah. Have they produced anything like that in the last few weeks? No. Have they looked like they were going to produce it in the last few weeks? No.
Yes.
So it's almost like for the players that'd almost be a change of tactics. I'm sure it was always part of their tip sheet to play that brand of football, but it's going to be a change of what they produce. So maybe, I don't know, maybe we were wrong. Maybe that wasn't on the tip sheet, but it should be this week.
Yep.
So, mate, what's your thoughts on the relative strengths and weaknesses and where this is going to be played and won?
Look, I suppose the two big areas for me, because I'm not really worried about the right edge. It's going to be how much does the left edge improve with the return of Dylan Brown and the transfer of Ryan Madison to the same side defensively and offensively, and how much do we lose in the middle with Maddo going from that position to the left edge, and can we compete and dominate in the ruck? Because we mentioned it, that smash mouth, dominate the ruck is our bread and butter, and we just haven't been there or thereabouts in recent weeks, outside of that, finishing fitter than the Cowboys in that contest up in Townsville. So they've got to do that. Junior has to lead the way, and I actually thought Junior was okay against Melbourne. I had another look back at that game, and he certainly wasn't the big issue there. But he's going to need some help. He's going to need Joe Effengahe to step up. He's going to need Witteramu Greg, who I do have some concerns about his conditioning because the big fella's been out for a while. So he's going to have to be on a minutes restriction, but he's going to have to rip him when he gets in there. Makasi Makatoa's going to have to step up. Luca Moretti might get some more opportunities. So we need to compete in the ruck, and we need to set that platform. And defensively, we need to be, showing some intent, because that hasn't been there in the last couple of weeks.
Does it surprise you that we're already asking Joey Lussick to play 80 minutes?
A little bit. I'm not really sure what's going on there with Brendan Hands, whether he's been given not the week off, but a chance to freshen up, or if they've identified something in the tape to say he needs to work on in reserve grade, and didn't have the luxury in recent weeks without the second dummy half on the roster to do so. But I didn't think he was the biggest of issues against the Melbourne Storm.
No, and especially as what was he replaced about 25 minutes into the game?
Exactly.
Something like that.
And it's not like Lussick had a bad game either. But
no. I thought we might have had Brendan on the bench because of, well, he's got utility value as well. Mm-hmm. So if I'm critical of this team lineup, it's that I might have liked to have seen Brendan Hands on the bench. But then I look at the forwards that are there, and you mentioned Wiramu, and maybe his his minutes are going to be limited. We haven't seen Luca Moretti play anything like long minutes. His stints have been short, haven't they, in first grade up to now? So we can't expect all of a sudden he's going to pull in a main rotation type of minutes out there. And this is where it gets interesting, because you've got Andrew Davey there and you've got Ryan Madison, and then you think, okay, so does Ryan Madison go from being on the edge to being part of the middle rotation? Because if he's just going to be straight out replaced by Andrew Davey on an edge, so that Davey's playing edge, which he does more frequently, he can play in the middle. But if he goes to an edge, you wouldn't think he's going to be playing many minutes. And if, to replace Ryan Madison, if Ryan Madison isn't part of the middle rotation, because Maddo can and likes to, he can do, and he likes to play those long minutes. And even when he starts on the bench, he generally gets about 60 minutes of football. So I'm not really sure what the plan is going to be around the rotation. Look, I'm going to expect a little bit more from Joe Offengawe. I think we're not going to see the best of Joe. I said this the other day, until after he's done a pre-season with the Eels. But we're still 2 matches without RCG, and we have to. It's the Broncos next week, isn't it?
Yes, up at the Gabba.
Yeah. We have to rapidly hit form and combinations, and it has to start with this game here. So I'm expecting big games from our main 2 playmakers in Gutherson and Moses. I'm not including Dylan in that main playmaker at the moment, because of the fact that he's coming back after so long out. I mean, will he come back? They talked about how good Cleary looked because he was so fresh after being out of the game for so long. Will Dill come back looking fresh, or will he be troubled by what's happened being on his mind?
It's a fair question.
I keep coming back to it. I really think that's going to be the tail of the tape there for him. What's going on in his head? Jermaine Hopgood, mate. He is so consistent. I think, you know what? I think I'm going to put a lot of our hopes this week on his performance. So much so that I'm ready. If you're ready, mate, I'm ready to give my predictions for this week.
Let's get into it.
Yep. I'm going to say that the Eels win 32-22. I see Jermaine Hopgood as best on field, and I see Bailey Simonson as first try scorer.
I like that. I want to see a big win, and I've tipped some big wins recently. I'm going to be a bit more conservative this week and get just the Eels getting enough done to secure the 2 points. So I'll go for about a 26-12 victory, thereabouts. I'm going to go to the left edge to be the big improvers this week. Ryan Madison, the try scorer, maybe Dylan Brown, the try scorer, but I'll go Ryan Madison if I had to put a name there. And then best on field, well, honestly, it's going to take a collective team effort here. So you could name, a whole raft of people here. I know you shouted out Jermaine Hopgood having a big one here. I think Dylan's going to be good, but maybe not great. He might overplay his hand a little bit, be a bit rusty. I'm going to go for a player that I think has just stood tall amongst all our mediocrity recently in Will Penasini.
Okay, yeah, I like that, because I was looking out at the centres with having that tip around Bailey Simonson. So I like the Will Penasini tip there. Mate, it's, as you said, we have to get this done. We just have to get this done. So we've tipped at least 2 Eels wins out of the 4. Let's hope we can get 3, maybe 4 games out of the weekend. That if we were to achieve that, I'd be literally dancing on the ceiling after the weekend is up. So fingers crossed that we can get all the teams across the line. We're tipping at least 2 of the teams get across the line this weekend.
Mm-hmm.
To the people that are listening, thank you for tuning into the podcast. We're actually recording this on a Wednesday night. You're probably going to be listening to this on a Friday. So if there's been any late developments or changes, if we have the opportunity, we'll drop something in. If not, our apologies for not quite having the latest news when this is going up.
Future 4020 here. Since recording on Wednesday, we have since had some murmurs and agitation in the media that there will be a change to the team. It looks like Isaac Lumi could be out, and coming in to replace him on the wing, making his NRL debut in that case, is Arfamela Stephen. Should that be how it plays out, obviously we're very excited to see how Artie plays in his debut, and very happy to see him making that debut, but we've got to wait and see. But I think we've got a couple of reports via Christian Nicolosi and the Mole saying that it is sort of trending that way right now, so well done to Arthur if that is the case, and we're excited to see him run out at CommBank Stadium on Sunday, making his NRL debut.
John, thank you again for your fine work. Thank you to our sponsors, Big Swing Golf at Northmead and Star Partners Real Estate, Auburn, Narellan and Parramatta. Thank you to Parramatta Leagues Club for their support in and having us host the post-match celebration, as it will be this week, in Jack's Bar and Grill after the big game. Head there straight after the game. We'll kick off about half an hour after full time. So come and join us, enjoy a drink, have a feed, have a listen to some footy talk. Come up and say g'day after the match, because we enjoy having a bit of a chat with people, whether you're regular listeners to the podcast or you've simply been at the game and you want to have a bit of a chat, more of a chat about what's going on. We really enjoy that. Nothing better than a Sunday afternoon at the football. The Blue and Gold Alliance doing their lap of honour before the big game. Get there, give a cheer to those people that have worn the blue and gold jerseys in the past. And one last thing, mate, go you mighty Eels.